Hey folks, in this video, let's talk about Indian Railways. It is a massive government organization and one which is very close to every Indian's heart. Almost everyone in India have at least traveled once on an Indian train. This year, Indian Railways is supposed to carry about 7.5 billion passengers, 750 crore. That is equivalent to every single Indian traveling about 5 times this year on an Indian train. So it's good to see hefty amounts being allocated and spent on capital expenditure for Indian Railways. It's good to see trains like Vande Bharat, Namo Bharat, Amrit Bharat being designed and built in India. In the recently announced Indian budget for the financial year 2026, almost 2.6 trillion rupees were allocated to Indian Railways CAPEX. Now, according to the government, the money is going to be spent on a whole bunch of things from improving safety, increasing the railway network, new trains, new coaches, transitioning from ICF to LHB coaches. LHB coaches are newer, safer, more efficient, and so on. While it's good that upgrades are being made to the Indian railway system, but in my view, Indian Railways should be able to do this on their own. Here's why I'm saying that. Look at the revenue and expenditure equation of the Indian Railways for the financial year 2025, that is the ongoing financial year. Indian Railways is on track to bring in revenue of around 2.8 trillion rupees. And revenue expenditure is also going to be in the same range, 2.76 trillion rupees. Revenue expenditure, by the way, is how much Indian Railways spend to keep its daily operations going. It includes expenses like salaries, pension, fuel, and maintenance. So, whatever money is coming in, all being spent on just keeping its day to day operations going. Not a lot left to build new trains, research and development, safety upgrades, etc. This is where central government steps in with its capital expenditure support. And Indian Railways capex has been rising over the past decade. You can see it has gone up almost 5 times in the last 10 years. Even if you look at capital expenditure as a share of total expenditure of Indian Railways, it has gone up from 30% 10 years back to almost 50%. So again, it's good that money is being spent to upgrade railways capital assets, which is good for its long term growth prospect. But the support is coming from the central budget. It is as if government is subsidizing a major private firm. Indian Railways bring in 2.8 trillion rupees in revenue, roughly $30 billion. Dollars. Tata Consultancy Services also brings in about the same amount in revenues. So it is akin to government giving Tata Consultancy Services $30 billion to build new buildings, buy new hardware, build new server farms, etc. We need to ask if this arrangement is sustainable. We need to find a way either to reduce revenue expenditure, 64% of which, by the way, are expenses on salaries and pensions, or allow Indian Railways to increase passenger fares, increase revenue from passenger operations, increase revenue from freight operations as well. Here's why. Look at the breakup of total revenue for Indian Railways. As we saw in the beginning, this year Indian Railways is on track to bring in 2.8 trillion rupees in total. If you see the trend, over 60% of the total revenue comes from freight operations. Most of the rest comes from passenger operations. But share of the passenger operation revenue in the Indian Railways total revenue is going up. Now, if you further zoom into the passenger side of the revenue equation, the three categories that saw major increase in demand are AC 3 tier, executive class, and AC chair car. Now, upper middle class and the rich opt for these three categories. The other section that saw almost doubling of demand is the second class ordinary. This is also indicative of K shaped recovery post pandemic in India, where a select few at the top are getting richer and the rest are falling behind. Now, look at the divergent nature of outcomes from passenger and freight services. Indian Railways make money on freight services, lose money on passenger services. Now, prior to 2019, profit from freight services was high enough to absorb the losses from passenger services, where at the end of the day, Indian Railways was breaking even. After pandemic, profit from freight services has been falling. Demand for passenger services has been rising, and so has the losses associated with it. Therefore, net profit for Indian Railways turned negative in 2020 and 2021. Even now, we saw Indian Railways is barely breaking even, bringing in just enough money to keep its daily operations going. Therefore, Indian Railways should aim to improve its profit and revenue from freight operations, reduce losses from passenger operations, better yet, set in motion a phased plan to increase passenger fares and move towards profitability from passenger operations, and try to reduce revenue expenditure. Think of it in another way. If Indian Railways is able to generate enough surplus between their revenue and expenditure, where it can fund its own capex, $30 billion worth of capex support from the government can be redirected to Indian defense, and India's defense will see a much needed boost. I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.